The COP22 summit in Marrakech has been rattled by Donald Trump's victory. The American president-elect has previously said that he'll withdraw from the Paris Agreement on climate change within 100 days of taking office. So delegates are sure to be asking what that means for the global fight against climate change. The meeting's ongoing in Marrakech.
Indeed, from the campaigns that we have heard and the remarks that the now President Trump has made, there could be some doubts that maybe the funding might not be coming from the USA. But I'm looking at it that maybe those were just his campaign gimmicks. But him himself now, the Trump as a president, he must have a different approach, different opinion from what he was using for campaign. And again, I have my hopes that USA as a government is bigger than the presidency itself. So he has got advisors, he has got a whole government machinery, which I don't see him departing from radically.
It concerns us, of course, but the Paris Agreement is already entered into force. And you heard by yourself today that the water international community is asking for dialogue with Mr. Donald Trump. So this is, let's let time do its job, and let's Mr. Donald Trump take care about this huge problem which is threatening even some state of America.
Well, let's go live now to Marrakech, where CCTV's Uche Koronko is standing by with the latest highlights from the climate change summit. Uche, let's start with the day's big news, that dramatic victory by Donald Trump. I imagine some concern there in Marrakech, given his feelings towards the Paris Climate Agreement. Tell us more about the reaction there at COP22.
Well, Lindy, as you heard there, of course, Trump's win has cast sort of a cloud of uncertainty here at the COP22 in Marrakech. As you heard there, delegates here are concerned about the impact this could have on the talks that are taking place. Now, why, of course, Trump has come out boldly to say that he questions the science behind climate change. He talks about the fact that he vows to rip the Paris Agreement apart. He also talks about the fact that he will support the production of coal in the US going forward, which is one of the dirtiest fossil fuels. Now, what delegates are questioning here is the fact that the US was critical in pushing forward that Paris Agreement across the finish line. The US is also one of the richest nations in the top six amongst the top six polluting countries. Now, as well as that, the fact that nations are questioning here the fact that the U.S. is supposed to push forward funding. They're supposed to play a big role in funding here on the continent. Another fact is the fact that the U.S., how can nations commit to some of those commitments made under the Obama's administration? Now, talking to some of the delegates here on ground, it's obviously they're openly unhappy with what's going on with the Trump win over in the U.S. But one thing I will mention is talking to Madam El Haight, who is a COP22 champion here in Marrakech. She did mention the fact that they will respect the U.S. democratic decision, but she does believe that in the future, sometime in the future, they will sit down with Trump and have a chat with him about climate change going forward. But as you can see, it's a wait-and-see situation. Now, joining me to give us some more insight into this topic is Nick Nuttall. He's a UNFCCC spokesperson. And Nick, what is your take on what's going on here? Do you think, what impact do you think that Trump's win will have on climate change talks? And what impact has it had so far?
Well, I mean, as you say, there's been a lot of chatter today here in the corridors, and I think when any leader of a major economy like the United States is elected, there's a lot of talk about what that means. But the delegates here are doing their business. They got down to work. They're working towards the aims of this conference in Marrakech, which is about taking forward the Paris Climate Change Agreement and implementing it. And I see that just, was it yesterday that Japan ratified the agreements? There were well over 100 nations who have brought it into law. So, yeah, I think work is carrying on here.
Now, one of the things that the leaders I spoke to earlier mentioned was the fact that 100 nations are behind this agreement, so we don't need to worry about the Paris Agreement going forward. But the fact is, the U.S. Did make some commitments. What's your take on whether the U.S. can back out of some of those commitments that it made? Do you think that we'll see some of those accords crumbling going forward?
Well, I suppose the question is why? Because what has actually changed? I mean, the fact is that the United States is moving towards a low-carbon green economy as we speak, as are so many other nations on Earth. I mean, you've got large corporations like Coca-Cola, Google, Apple. You've got cities like New York and Seattle, many cities in the States and many states within the States who are moving towards this transition because they see it as being in their economic as well as their environmental and social interests to actually deal with climate change and move to a cleaner, greener, more resource-efficient economy. It's about competitiveness. So the question would be, why would the United States want to move? Because that's not changed. And also the physics hasn't changed. I mean, the fact is that the pollution is going into the atmosphere, and all the best risk assessments show that if we carry on with that, there's going to be more extreme weather events, more damage, more destruction to supply chains around the world, which all economies depend on. So I think it's more a question of why would they want to do that when in fact nothing has changed in terms of the science, in terms of the potential economic benefits of acting and the real risks of inaction to all economies.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. Nick Natal, a UNFCCC spokesperson. Back to you, Lindy.
Well, thanks very much, Uche Koronko, live there for us in Marrakech. Speaking to Nick Nuttall from the UNFCCC, who says the hard work of addressing the challenges of climate change continues in Marrakech, irrespective of the results of the US election.